Did you know most people only know one version of Sierra Leone's story? The one that says it was a place where British sent freed slaves. But that version, it erases almost everything that actually happened. So let's talk about the real story. Long before any British ships touched the coastline, Sierra Leone was home to strong, organized indigenous nations. Nations like the Temne, the Mende, the Limga, the Loco, the Susu, the Kono, and many others. Forgive me if I mispronounce some of those. These weren't small communities. They had their own governments, secret societies, trade networks, and some of the strongest warriors in West Africa. That's the reason Europeans stayed on the coast for hundreds of years and never got to control the interior. The indigenous people, they said no. And then in the late 1700s, the British came up with a plan. They wanted a place to relocate Black people from England, the Black poor. These were people who were living in poverty after years of filling the ranks of the Navy, doing labor in the city, or being abandoned by the system. In 1787, they sent the first group to what would become Freetown. A few years later, another group arrived, the Black Loyalists from Nova Scotia. These were people that were from the American colonies who fought for the British during the Revolution. They were promised land and freedom, and then they were shipped to Canada, and then finally moved to Sierra Leone. Many of them Indigenous Americans who had been reclassified as Negro or colored, and once again, their identities were erased. After that came the Jamaican Maroons. Britain had removed them and sent them to Sierra Leone as well. They were some of the fiercest freedom fighters in the Caribbean. After that came the recaptives. Once Britain outlawed the slave trade, the Navy intercepted slave ships and released the captives into Sierra Leone. These people came from dozens of ethnic groups: the Kru, the Congo, the Mandinka, so many others. They rebuilt Freetown, added their language, their skills, their music, and their traditions. Over time, these groups, the Black poor, the Loyalists, the Maroons, and the recaptives, they blended with the indigenous communities and created something new. The Creole people, with their own language, culture, and identity. The Creole became teachers, traders, and missionaries across West Africa. But the British used them as intermediaries, which created tension with indigenous nations already living there. Even then, the indigenous people stood firm. In 1898, during the famous Hut Tax War, the Temne and Mende warriors fought the British in one of the strongest resistance movements in the region. Sierra Leone didn't become fully colonized until the end of the 1800s. And even then, the resistance never stopped. Sierra Leone became independent in 1961. And like many nations reshaped by outside forces, it had to rebuild through conflict, civil war, and recovery. But the country today still stands. It's still growing and still pushing forward. So the real story of Sierra Leone isn't just about a home for freed slaves. It's about powerful indigenous nations that never surrendered. People from the Americas and the Caribbean who were displaced, and a blending of cultures that created one of the most unique societies in the world. Have a good night.